Great. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Ryan Schmier. I'm the head of operations for Spark Services North America, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is part 3 of a 4-part webinar on the journey to consistency within your architecture models, getting through the journey from model validation to model governance so you can really control what's going on within your architecture models. Today, our webinar is going to be focused on rules, rule sets, and profiles. So what we're talking about here is how do you write custom rules to validate your models against the things that you care about. And there's some different pieces involved with that puzzle that we'll be talking about today. I'm joined by Dr. Istvan Rath, Managing Director of IncQuery Group, as well as Chris Armstrong, President and Chief Architect of Armstrong Process Group. So with that, we're going to kick it over in just a second. One housekeeping note, if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them either into the chat or into the Q&A section in Zoom so we can capture those. We will take some time for Q&A at the end. So with that, Istvan, it's over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today and taking the time. Let me just start, as usual, with a very brief introduction as to who we are. So IncQuery is a company that is well known for being a trustworthy partner for creating digital engineering success. Over the last 12 years, actually, we've been active in the MBSE community, of course, specializing in tool integration, customization, and of course, also developing our own products, mostly in the context of quality assurance, which is, of course, also the topic of the presentation for today.
And I'm Chris Armstrong with APG. I don't need to go through the details of this slide, but basically summarize, we're trying to advance industry standard best practices through participation with industry standards organizations, and then helping end user organizations adopt those best practices. So just to kind of kick it off, this is, again, our third webinar. We can provide links to the preceding webinars if you haven't had the opportunity to join us for those to get to the recordings. But, we've gone through, some of the different dimensions of what do we mean by, model quality, and what does validation mean? What is it good for? How does it help us? The idea that, we're trying to help both, modelers from making common mistakes, being conformant with whatever methodology our organization has adopted, as well as the standards that we're supposed to be complying with, such as, SysML, UAF, ArchiMate, BPMN, so on and so forth. But what we're going to focus on today is it's all well and good to to have this capability with an out-of-the-box set of rules, which is, of course, a great way to start. And, of course, the architect in me is like, well, I certainly don't want to have to redefine a bunch of stuff that's already been defined, that's been vetted and proven and validated. So, what happens when, you start with the methodology conformance with something like SysMod or OOSEM and standards conformance with like SysML, but then you want to implement your own custom methodology, as well as possibly your own custom meta model by implementing in Enterprise Architect what we call a UML profile, and then packaging that in a MDG technology. So that's what we're going to be. Istvan will be taking the reins from here, and we'll share with everybody the features of the product set that allow you to tailor the validation rules and the sets of rules to your specific implementation needs. So why don't you take it from here, Istvan?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. As we've been talking about during the last 2 iterations of this webinar series, of course, the topic is our product, IncQuery Validator for Enterprise Architect, which is a quite powerful new product to add model validation capabilities into the Enterprise Architect ecosystem, basically from the built-in add-on capabilities as part of the authoring environment towards DevOps compatible deployment options, which we will actually cover in the last webinar series at the end of August. So the topic for the demonstration today is actually one of the most often asked questions that we get when we talk about the product. It's all nice and good, but how do I customize the functionality? How do I change the way the built-in rule sets behave? How do I add my own rule into the picture? So this is exactly what I'm going to be showing to you today. And of course, the biggest feature of interest here is what we call the Ruleset SDK or software development kit that comes with the validator. And this is actually a standalone tool, as you will see later in the demonstration, that works in tandem with the validator as an add-on inside Enterprise Architect or as part of a DevOps style deployment. The aim of this feature is, of course, to help advanced users, so systems engineer or modeling experts, really to fine-tune the validation capabilities, basically for the aim of perfectly fitting in-house methodologies or best practices. Now, this, I have to underline again, is, of course, something that is meant for advanced users, so people who are not afraid to use a kind of a software engineering environment, which Eclipse fundamentally is. But to make that easier, we not only provide the SDK itself, but it comes with a lot of tutorials, built-in samples. You can also get the original specification sources of the built-in rule sets, which we have covered in previous iterations of the webinar, so the SAIC or the SysMod rule set and so on and so forth. And of course, if you are really into this, then we can also help you with trainings and further customization options, which can boost your capabilities even further. But let's not get so far ahead of ourselves and just cover the basics as part of a couple of demonstrations for today. First off, I will actually not start yet with the Eclipse-based environment, but something a lot simpler, because I consider this aspect of the customization of the abilities of the validator the most fundamental way to do this, which is actually related to a feature that I have been showing in the last webinar, what we call the structural validation or the MDG validation. Now, I suppose most of you are familiar with what MDG technology is. It's basically the feature set or built-in capability of Enterprise Architect to capture profiles. Actually, the well-known, domains like SysML or BPMN or others come as built-in MDGs in Enterprise Architect, and you can also create your own if you like. So a lot of advanced customers actually do this. All of this is covered in quite nice detail and as part of the official documentation of the tool. So I'm not going to go into further details to that. Now, why do we need validation capabilities in this context? Well, it's quite easy to explain why. It's because Enterprise Architect as an environment allows you to either activate or deactivate what we call this strict mode or strict connector syntax mode. And what we have found in our own practice is that a lot of users, a majority of users actually don't use this or disable this because it makes working with MDGs and the tool in general easier. However, the downside of that is that you can very easily end up creating diagrams or models which are not strictly compliant to the profiles of the MDGs because you may miss the application of certain stereotypes, or you end up applying the wrong one, or you make some other mistake, or simply because versions change and you continue working on your old project, that may also result in something like this. So what the validator can do is you can activate a built-in so-called validation library, this structural validation library that works with any MDG, so built-in, even encrypted ones, and of course all your own. It detects all the MDGs that are used in a particular project, and it runs a special set of validation rules, which actually are also illustrated here on this report on the right side, that check each of the relationships, whether their source and target are compliant in terms of applying stereotypes to what is encapsulated in the MDG definition. It also does what we call the view specification check, which basically checks whether the particular elements that you have put on a diagram are actually allowed to be present on that diagram, again, in terms of the MDG. And this is something that may seem simple at first glance, but if you are working with a complex domain like Archimate or UAF or others, this can become a very, very powerful and useful feature, because it's very easy to add what we call technical depth to your work and not even realize that you have done so. So here is a short live demo of how this feature works in practice. Now we are using BPMN as an example, and I will continue to use the BPMN example throughout this demonstration. We have activated the structural validation. It detects that the BPMN MDGT, aside from the standard profile, is used in this drawing, and it can detect errors like this. For example, this is one of the view specification issues, that this particular element actually lacks a proper stereotype that should be there, and otherwise it's not really allowed to be present on the diagram. Same thing can happen for connectors as well. So that's also a similar kind of mistake that is easy to make. And finally, the connectors themselves can also be validated in terms of the source and target compliance. So whether that particular element in terms of typing or stereotype application is something that is allowed to be a target of a particular connector. Again, if you switch the strict connector syntax on, you cannot create such errors. So that is actually something that actively prohibits the user from doing this. But if you leave that off, it's very easy to do so. And then the validator can help you identify these mistakes and also fix them relatively easily. So let's move on to the more interesting and, of course, the most interesting aspect of this customization, which is what is sometimes called semantic validation. We actually did get a question the last time about this. Does the validator have capabilities to create my own semantic validation rules? Now, I found quite an interesting and nice article on the Sparks community site called How to Validate Your Enterprise Architect BPMN Models. And that also explains quite well what we usually mean by this. In our terminology, from the point of view of this model governance, this is actually both connected to the freedom from basic errors, but it also very easily leads to the methodology conformance, as we see later on. So just to, again, quote from this article, if you look at this example model here, maybe you notice that there are some subtle issues. For example, the final node does not have any incoming control flow edge, but has an outgoing control flow edge, which is of obviously not correct. Final node should not have any outgoing control flow edge. And the reason why it is possible to create is because even if you do the structural validation, sometimes the MDGs are made in a way that allow, in terms of just typing checks for things like this to be created. Therefore, syntactically, this may be a valid model, but semantically, for obvious reasons, it's not. So that's why there is a need for doing semantic validation. Question is how to detect this as an error. Now, the original article goes on to explain how to write validation rules in OCL in an Eclipse-based environment outside of Enterprise Architect, and also do the validation itself outside of Enterprise Architect. With the IncQuery Validator, you don't need to do that at all. So the IncQuery Validator can do this inside Enterprise Architect. And how we do that is we create custom rules for the BPMN domain. Now, in contrast to the OCL, so the Object Constraint Language, the validator uses a different specification language. It's also an open source language, actually, from the Eclipse world. It's called VQuel, or Viatra Query Language. There is quite an extensive documentation available if you are interested. This is a query language. It's a declarative language, and the fundamental notion in this language is called a graph pattern. This graph pattern is an atomic or elementary unit of logic, which describes a set of conditions of how a particular part of the model should look like if we were to have a match of that particular pattern. And so for the IncQuery Validator, what we do is we use this language, this SQL language, to create patterns that correspond to the erroneous, let's say, situations in the model that we want to report as either warnings or errors or whatever. So in this particular case, there are actually, let's say, two scenarios which I incorporated into my example to be reported as error locations. This start event has an incoming sequence flow. So we have a start event and there is this control flow edge of type sequence flow coming from some element. We don't really care which one, but it goes into the start event. So this is something that I want to report as an error. And analogously, there's a counterpart to this, that end event has got an outgoing control flow edge. So this code snippet that you see on the screenshot on the left side is an actual screenshot from this Eclipse-based development environment. And these are essentially how we capture the specifications to these rules. So once we have something like this captured, then you can very easily deploy such a rule into enterprise architecture. And very soon I will show how. And once you have that deployed, you can run it, and it will actually behave exactly like all the other validation rules that come as part of the built-in libraries of the validator. So here you can see that we have drawn first the error in the wrong direction. It was detected as an error. Once the modeler goes on to fix it and they rerun the validation, then the error report will of course go away, and we can be sure that we have actually fixed the error. So this is the kind of behavior that is possible to do. Now let's see how we do this actually from a technical point of view. And this will be the real interesting part of the demo. Now for this demo, I will actually use a little bit more elaborate or more complex example than the one that was featured in this original article. So instead of just looking for, whether the start or endpoint has got some incoming or outgoing edge, I will show you what we can mean by methodology conformance. So let's assume that we are a company that takes the business process modeling and even a little bit more seriously, and we want to make sure that we do not introduce, let's say, cyclicity into a business model in an accidental way. And what I may consider to be such a case of an accidental cycle is that there is a non-trivial, so longer than 2, cyclic sequence of message flows happening between activities that are assigned to different pools. If I have a cycle in activities that are in the same pool, I say that's fine. I just have a cyclic process. But if the cycle goes across several different activity pools, I want to make that visible as a warning, at least, so that my modeler is aware of this. So now this is really something that is a non-trivial, let's say, methodology conformance consideration. Let's see how we do that. Now, this will be a little bit more complex example, so I suggest to pay special attention here. So this is actually how the Eclipse-based environment works in its raw form. First of all, you can actually open an enterprise architect model inside this Eclipse environment as you would open any kind of Eclipse modeling framework model. We have a way of allowing these QAX or other kind of enterprise architect files to be opened directly in this way. And what you start out using is what we call this BPMN type library. This type library is basically the one that we supply for an MDG like BPMN2 that contains, let's say, helper queries or patterns to identify elements belonging to a certain type. So you don't need to deal with how to represent this stereotype application in this language. It comes as a built-in library that you can refer to. And once you have this, then you can start writing your own special custom query. This will be the cycle detection query in the VQuery language. Now, the VQuery language, of course, is a graph-oriented query language. So graph notions like reachability paths and transitive closures, which correspond to the computation of, let's say, indirect relationships, are very compact, let's say, capabilities of this language. So it's just enough to put this plus sign here in this line, and that will automatically tell the interpreter that I'm interested in the computation of this reachability, so this transitive closure notion. And here you can see a little bit, I will make this pause it, how, if in terms of logic, we check for the fact that the activities which are part of this non-trivial cycle are belonging to different activity pools. We use some helper pattern for that, and we say that the pools should be different. So it's this easy and this compact to express such a rather complex notion that we are computing cycles and reachability paths along the model, and of course checking where, in terms of activity pools, each part of the elements of that cycle belong to. If this is something that looks complex to you, don't be afraid. As I said, there is a lot of documentation and examples available for this language. We can also help you with the training aspect. So once you get the hang of this and the logic of this, in my experience, it's quite easy to learn and use it in very, very powerful and intuitive ways. You can actually use this Eclipse-based environment to run these queries and these patterns and debug them without actually having to go into Enterprise Architect. So you can apply these query definitions against the model that has been loaded into Eclipse. So you can see what kind of results they yield. And here we can already see that there will actually be cycles in this particular model. So we should see some warnings being reported later on when we transition to Enterprise Architect. So how we put this into Enterprise Architect? The key to that is to create a special kind of configuration description file in a JSON language. You add some property values, like it is highlighted this example here. This is also well documented as part of our environment. And once you are done with the JSON file, the only thing that you need to do is to copy these files into a special location inside your installation of the validator. So it's just a file copy over operation, very simple to do, very quick to do. And once you have that done, then the validator will tell you that there was some change detected in the contents of the ruleset folder. And then this new ruleset that you just modified will automatically appear in the menu. You can run it as you would with any other built-in ruleset, and you will already see the results reported exactly in the same way as with the built-in libraries. It works exactly the same way. So it will compute the cycles. Indeed, there are cycles here. So we can fix the cycles by removing some of the message flow. So in this sequence, we already removed one message flow. There is still one cycle with 3 activities. So the modeler will go on in this demo, identify the problematic relationship somewhere. Of course, this is maybe a little bit tricky in some cases, but this, I realize that's a problematic one. So I delete that. And then after I run the validation for one final time, I should realize that there are no cycles, no warnings anymore. So to sum up, it's quite easy, actually, in terms of the operation. Once you have this SDK in your environment, you follow the documentation, you use the samples that we provided, and then it's very easy to test live, either as part of the programming environment itself or in your deployment of the validator. Yes, as we covered it already before, the validator actually comes in 3 variations or 3 tiers. For most of the demonstration, you have seen the standalone edition, which is an add-on to Enterprise Architect. And as you have seen now, using this ruleset SDK, it's very easy to customize and add custom rulesets to that standalone edition. But exactly the same custom rulesets can be then used as part of the team configuration as well. So both the standalone edition as an Enterprise Architect add-on, as well as the team edition as a standalone app that can be invoked in the command line and run as part of DevOps style automation processes, can use these custom rule sets to generate those reports that I have been showing you in the previous part of the webinar series. And how that DevOps deployment will look like, and how to configure and run that automatically, and how to leverage scalability, let's say capabilities of that system, and how to build infrastructures that can run quality assurance processes, not just for individual users and small teams, but also maybe on a large enterprise level. This will be the topic of our final installation of this series, which will be coming on the 20th of August. So that will be the conclusion of the series. And as Chris has said, all the previous editions of the series, as well as this one, will be available or are already available on our website, so you can check them out very easily. If you want to discuss further, we are of course very open to follow-ups, and you can also meet us in some upcoming events virtually at the Enterprise Architect Global Summit, and in person at Integrate, which will be in Cleveland, and also at the OMG Technical Meeting in Chicago the week before that. So thanks again, and I will just hand over to Chris to say some final words as well.
No, thanks very much, Istvan. And while Istvan was talking about how simple it is to do the extensions and customizations, and with great documentation, of course, we are available to help out with that. One of our common missions is to help people figure out what modeling framework should they use, coming up with their own custom meta model. And then implementing that as an MDG technology. So helping out with, implementing that customization in your inquiry modeling is another, area that we can help out. And of course, one of the slippery slopes I see is that often our target community being engineers and architects, we're some really smart people. We can do anything, and it's not whether you can or can't do this stuff. I'm sure everybody is smart and capable enough to do it. It's really, should you do it? Because you guys, are the only people that can build the content that is, sufficient and suitable for your target requirements and your target organization. So, having a partner to help you out with that often makes a lot of sense. So I think with that, Brian, maybe hand it back to you to see if there's any questions and close it out. I don't know if you're still there, Ryan.
Ryan? I think Ryan maybe has some connectivity issues, so I think...
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay, great. We do have two questions here. The first question is, can you talk a little bit about how the rule sets are stored, and whether you can reuse them across projects or have them shared across multiple modelers?
Yeah, well, the rule sets from a technical point are special files in the deployment of the validator, so on the file system. You can take a look at them, actually, if you are really interested in that. It's very easy to share them. You can put them in any kind of a file shell or a version control system or whatnot. And that's how I think they can also be deployed across several different users.
Okay, great. And then the other question we have is, Chris mentioned a little bit about, getting some professional services help to help you write rules. With engineers, a lot of them like to do stuff themselves. Are there any training courses available, either through APG or through IncQuery, to teach people how to write rules?
Yeah, Chris, maybe you want to take that one, or should I take it?
Go ahead, Istvan.
Yeah, so definitely, yes. We developed a lot of trainings for this, from the very basics to more advanced questions. It's something that exists as video recording, so you can consume it that way, or our experts are very flexible in terms of doing some custom or even on-site trainings if that's of need. So there is lots of options, I think, that we can cater to when it comes to this topic.
Yep, absolutely. And as far as APG helping out, particularly with U.S. North American based customers, we have similar types of offerings.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Exactly.
Okay, that's all we've got in the way of Q&A right now. If folks have additional questions, please reach out to either Chris or Isfan. They'll be happy to address them. Also, if you're going to be at any of the upcoming events, Insight, the OMG meeting, Chris will also be at the IncQuery Western States Regional Conference coming up in September as well. So look for the guys there. If not, schedule some time and reach out with them. Ask your questions. The folks from APG and IncQuery are here to help make your modeling a success. And with that, we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.